Good evening. Continuing in the mode in which we've been going, we've been talking about the Torah portions that we would be reading if we were going to synagogue every Shabbat. We read a different section of the 5 books of Moses of the Bible, and so I'm going to continue. Took a break last week. Obviously, it was last Tuesday night was the end of Passover. And so now we're going to continue. I missed out what would have been read last week, which was the Parsha called Shemini, meaning the 8th day. And then this coming Shabbat, we would be reading a double Parsha, double portion. We would be reading the portions called Tazria and Metzora. So I'm going to try to encapsulate the 3 Torah portions that I haven't spoken about. So last week was Shemini, and this coming week is the 2 Parshas called Tazria and Metzora. So I'm going to talk about them, but they have a theme that runs through them, and I think it's an interesting theme, and it's actually very appropriate to the days that we are living in now. And obviously everything can tie back to something that we can learn from the Torah sources, from this amazing guidebook to how to live that we've been given. So let's delve a little bit into some of the things that are swirling around with these 3 Torah portions. So let me just recap a little bit. Obviously, we've come through the whole Passover experience. We've come out of Egypt. We've come to Mount Sinai. We've received the Torah. We're now in the desert. God says, after the sin of the golden calf, if you remember, the Jewish people built this calf. They were very anxious that Moses hadn't come down with the Torah, with the 10 Commandments. He hadn't come down at the time that they expected, and they asked Aaron, the Kohen, Aaron, the brother of Moses, to help them find some kind of intermediary that they could have between them and God. Moses, in their opinion, or in their thoughts, or in their fears, was not there, and so they had They included Aaron in their plans to help them build an intermediary. It turned out to be this calf, the golden calf, which Aaron continues to feel responsible for and feel shame about. So we're going to talk about that the shame that Aaron felt for being complicit with the Jews at that time, or with whoever it was, the rabble rousers that were part of the group that encouraged and needed and wanted to have some kind of intermediary between them and God. After the sin of the golden calf comes the instructions, all the instructions for how to build this Mishkan, to build this tabernacle that God says to the Jewish people, you build this tabernacle and do it precisely the way I tell you, do it this way with all of these measurements and exactitudes. It has to be done exactly right. And if you do it exactly right and you do everything as I tell you, you'll build the table, and there'll be a menorah, and there'll be the altars for sacrifices, and there'll be the Ark of the Covenant, into which will go the 10 Commandments that Moses brings down, the ones that he wrote the second time, and the ones that were shattered when he dropped them, or he threw them down, whatever, that those will go into the Ark of the Covenant, be in the center of this Mishkan, that all of these things will be done exactly as I tell you. And if you do that, what will happen is God's divine presence will descend and will live amongst you. So we talked about this. These are the previous Parshas, the previous Torah portions. I'm kind of bringing everybody up to speed because I see there's some new people listening. So that's where we are now. We're up to this 8th day. There were 7 days that led up when everything was built, everything was made as it was designed, as it was asked to be made. And Moses is the one that goes through 7 days of building and taking down, building and taking down, building and taking down the Mishkan, this tabernacle. And as you know, the Jewish people traveled throughout the desert for the 40 years that they were in the desert, and they moved depending upon when God wanted them to move. There was a cloud, there was fire that surrounded the Jewish people. And when the clouds would rise up and start to move, then the Jewish people would like get ready to move, and they'd start moving along, and they would disassemble the tabernacle and put it back together. And all along, God's presence would rest upon them, as evidenced by this fire that came down. This fire came down to say, yes, you've done it right. So Moses, at the beginning of last week's Torah portion, what's Moses doing? He's building and taking it down, building and taking it down. The mystics tell us that before God created this world, he created a world, destroyed a world, created a world, destroyed a world 7 times until he created this world, and the world that we live in. That's what the mystics teach us. And similarly, Similarly, Moses is constructing and deconstructing, and it's a lesson for us. Like we might try something and get it wrong. We might try something else and try again and then again and again. Like, don't give up. The measure of success is keep trying, keep doing, keep putting one foot forward, keep working. Like, we're never a finished product. We human beings are never a finished product. We human doers. We're not human beings. Like, we keep moving. We keep that actually. That's very appropriate for the time period that we're in now. Having left Passover, we're heading towards 49 days from the second day of Passover. 49 days later, we'll get to the holiday called Shavuos. We'll get to the holiday of the giving of the Torah to the Jews at Mount Sinai. So we've got a 49-day progression, a 49-day opportunity to work on ourselves, to go from a place of, I don't know anything about God, I've been in servitude, I've been in the lowest levels of a society that was not one that upheld holiness and divinity and transcendence and wasn't that world. And the Jewish people were plucked out of that, pulled out of that, we described before, like a fetus being pulled out of a womb of an animal. And we were put into the desert, and now we have to, day by day by day, year by year, we have to work on ourselves. We have to get to a higher place. And that's our journey of our soul coming into the world and being housed by our bodies. We're a combination of physical and spiritual, and we traverse this world until the days when our soul and our body will disassemble, will disassociate from each other at death. But this world is a world of doing and of working on ourselves and trying to be better and trying to kind of like take us up a notch, up a notch, up a notch, never giving up, and realizing that we go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps, like it's not a steady progression. We're works in progress. So Moses is doing this assembly and disassembly. And then it gets to the 8th day. And the 8th day is when he's giving the service. He's creating for Aaron a role. The role that Aaron, his brother, will have and is given this role in last week's Torah portion is to become the Kohen, to become the priest. And all of his descendants from that day on are the priestly tribe. Even today, we have in our midst, in the Jewish people, we have a tribe of people, goes through the men who are descendants of Aaron, the high priest, who was the priest on this day, what we're going to read about in last week's Torah portion. On the 8th day, he was given the mantle of becoming the priest. And all the descendants of Aaron from that time on are the Kohanim, are the priestly nations. And in this last week's Torah portion, is the first time that Aaron blesses the nation. He raises his hands up and he blesses the nation. He becomes a conduit for the divine blessing into the world. And I think it's an amazing concept to think how much we can bring into the world goodness and holiness by our words. So Aaron is the conduit for the divine blessing onto the people. But I want to stress how important words are. And I think that yes, in this week's Torah, it's last week's Torah portion, where Aaron is the one using words to bring divine blessing into the world, that we also have that capacity. We have the capacity to bless each other, and we have the capacity to use our words for good. So hold that thought. We're going to come back to it based on what we're going to be reading in the upcoming Torah portion. So I'm talking quickly because there's a lot to cover. So Aaron, he becomes the high priest. He becomes the one who's going to do the sacrifices on the altar. He's going to be able to be that person that's going to do the work in the Mishkan. It's very in the Tabernacle. It's very based in the Tabernacle. It's internal work that he does. And the people bringing their offerings, bringing their sacrifices, whatever it is, for different reasons. We'll talk about that another time. But Aaron's the one who does the work in the Mishkan. And when he has maybe even a glimpse of hesitation about taking on this role, Moses said to him, for this you were created. You were created for this job. And I think that that's another interesting thing to just stop and think about that concept. For this you were created. Like, well, what was I created? Why was I created? I remember when I was becoming religious, that was like an ongoing question. Why am I here? Why are we here? What are we here for? What's the purpose of our lives? Like, why are we here? And perhaps one of the things that comes out from Aaron saying, I don't know if this is the right job for me. And Moses saying, yes, for this you were created. And a few times in the Torah we have this interchange where somebody says to somebody else, for this you were created. You were created. Queen Esther, when she's in the king's palace and she's enjoined by Mordecai to go and visit King Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people, and she's hesitant to go in, and Mordecai says to him, for this you were created. You were created for this moment. And maybe some of us can in our lives say, this was a very pivotal time in my life, or this was something I did that was very important, and maybe for this I was created. I don't know, but definitely in this dimension of life, in this world that we live in now, thousands of years after what we read about in the Torah, we still have this concept of, for this I'm created. What am I created for? Am I created to work on myself? I'm created to transcend myself out of the physicality and go into some kind of a transcendent understanding of the universe and the world and the existential nature of our existence. Like, it's for us to think about, and at the end of the day, some of it involves like a little bit paring away some of the physicality. We can get mired in our physicality and to sort of like elevate ourselves a little bit. And learning Torah takes us up a notch, takes us out of the physicality and says, yes, physicality is very important, life's very important, but our soul is also very important. And how do I connect the physical with the spiritual? And that's exactly what the Mishkan was. The tabernacle was a connection between the spiritual world and the physical world, the connection between the spiritual world and the physical world. And that's what we are. We're a connection of spiritual and physical. Our soul, our neshama that's breathed into us, that comes into us through our nostrils, that God is breathing into us. It's a divine spiritual presence, essence that we have inside of our physical bodies. And in order to like access that soul, we have to kind of a little bit like think about these concepts and access that and think about that and work on ourselves. And again, that's something that Aaron questioned. He said to Moses, like, I don't know, can I do this? And he says, yes, for this you were created, for this you are created. And so we learn about the eighth day, and the eighth day was the day that Aaron was given this role. So we have a very interesting in Jewish sources something about the eighth day. What's the eighth day? The eighth day is one more than the seven weekdays we go through. We go through seven, right? We have 6 days of work, and then we have the day of Shabbat, and that's 7. And then there's an eighth day, and the eighth day is beyond. It's a transcendent day. It's a supernatural day. It's a day that beyond the constraints of our time machine that we live within a time frame of 7 days make a week, right? We go around, we get 7 days a week, and then we start a new week. But in the Torah, there's an idea of going into the eighth day, and the eighth day is a supernatural day. Hanukkah is 8 days. The bris milah, and we also read about the circumcision that's done on a baby boy is done on the 8th day. It's a transcendent day. It's the day beyond the normal, right? So when the tabernacle was consecrated, when it was finished, when it was time for the great, the moment of, I'm now constructed the tabernacle exactly like God requested and told us how to do it. And now we've got Aaron the high priest, and he's coming and he's getting this job. And now the measure of success is, does God's presence descend from the heavens? And what happens is that on this day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, that Aaron is there and he comes and he does his service, and the divine presence comes down in the form of a fire. Heavenly fire comes down, and there's great celebration. And it's an amazing idea to think that at that time in the desert, people were able to actually understand and feel and know that God was there. Like, we don't live in that world. We have to search everywhere for God. But in that day, it was obvious. On that day, when the inauguration of the tabernacle, it was obvious to everybody present that God's divine presence was descending as the service was being conducted, and as the smoke of the sacrifices was going up, then God's fire was coming down, and that was a joyous event. And the people cried out, and the people prostrated themselves, and there was no doubt in their mind. There was a unity of the Jewish people that is one that we yearn for. We yearn for that kind of unity. And again, this concept of unity is so important in our tradition. The idea that we are all one, that we're all part of each other, and we all need to help each other. And we all need to work with each other. And here's Aaron and Moses and Miriam, and it's the inauguration of the tabernacle. And down comes this fire. Success! Wow, it's amazing. And they're filled with the joy of the moment, like true simcha, true joy that God's connecting to them, and they've done something right, and their work has been blessed, and Aaron is blessing the people on behalf of God, like the blessing he's a conduit for the blessing onto the people, and he blesses them with love, and it's the three-tiered blessing that Aaron gives the people, that the people we should be blessed, we should have peace, we should be free from things that distract us, we should continue this unity. It's just an amazing moment. And then what happens? There are 4 sons of Aaron HaKohen. 2 of those sons enter into the Holy of Holies. They bring a fire offering that God did not command. They go above and beyond. They do, from their own desire to come close to God, they bring an offering that was not requested of them. It was not asked of them. They bring a fire offering into the Holy of Holies. And now what happens is a fire descends from heaven, and it consumes the souls of Aaron's 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu. And on that day, they die. And it's such a juxtaposition. It's such a juxtaposition of the joy of the celebration of God's presence being present. We did it right. And then Aaron's 2 sons, 2 of his sons, are consumed by fire, God's fire, because they did something God was not commanding them to do. And there's a lot of commentaries as to what they actually did, and whether they were drunk, and whether they should have asked Moses what to do. And there's a lot of different commentaries about why they died, and I don't want to go into that because I actually want to get to this week's Torah portion. But one of the things that happens is that Aaron, the father of these 2 boys, they just died in his watch on the most joyous of events. His 2 sons died, and God says to him, you have to continue doing the service. You, Aaron, and your descendants represent love and life. And that's what you need to continue doing. So you need to continue doing. Right now, you can't mourn the loss of your sons. And it says in the Torah that Aaron is silent. It uses the word Aaron is silent. And again, like, this leads to a lot of conversation about how to deal with death and how to deal with loss, and loss of our most beloved relationship are the people closest to you, your children. 2 of Aaron's children are consumed by fire. They die. And Aaron is silent. So, just to ponder how that, like, is it too big of a grief for him? Is he too wrapped up in the service that he's doing, that he can't kind of like hold these 2 realities at the same time? But like, how does Aaron, how do we interpret what it means when he's silent? So I'll leave that as an open question. And then when we grieve, in our day and age, we lose people and people are dying, and we're in an age where people are dying a lot, and we're faced with our fear of death, and how do we mourn? And we should mourn, and we do mourn, and we have things in our tradition as to how to mourn. It's very, very, very beautiful psychologically to help us process the loss of people that are nearest and dearest to us, or people that are very meaningful to us. We feel a hole in our hearts. We feel a loss that is the grief that we don't know quite how to express it, and it expressed through tears and through crying and through screaming and all these things. And Aaron's silent. So, he had a job to do, and he was in the tabernacle doing this job, and he couldn't. God says, don't, stay there, do that work, and later you can do what you need to do, but now you have to do this. Like, stay focused, do this. Yes, you can go home and cry later maybe, but now you have to be silent. And I don't know whether that's a model for us or not, but sometimes weeping, like, we can't even put it into words. Like, the grief is too beyond our capacity to bring it down and put it into words. Like, words don't do it justice. Like, it's an expression, it's an explosion, it's something. Or maybe Aaron was able to say, look, I'm so nothing. I'm so humble. I have no idea how God runs the world. But I also says Aaron, speculating perhaps from some of the things I've read, that Aaron's understanding that God runs the world and everything God does has a purpose and a reason and is for the good, the ultimate good. I might not recognize it, but it's the ultimate good. So what's interesting about Nadav and Avihu is that at the point where Moses goes up to receive the Ten Commandments, he goes up to get the Torah on Mount Sinai. He goes up, he starts walking up, and he starts walking up with the elders, and he walks up with the Nadav and Avihu. This was, prior to this incident. And Nadav and Avihu go with Moses up the mountain, and then they stop, and Moses continues on up. So Nadav and Avihu stay back, and they perceive some of the revelation of God. They see God on his heavenly throne, whatever that means. There's this sapphire brick under the throne of God, and they have a religious experience. They connect on some level to something much beyond their ability to understand, and it's so alluring. It's such a pleasurable experience. They want more of that. And one of the commentators speaks about Nadav and Avihu, that their, so to speak, crime when they brought an unasked for fire into the Holy of Holies was that they were seeking religious experience. They were seeking transcendence. They were seeking a connection to God. The problem was that they did it without the proper, discipline, without the rules. They did it on their own, and it led to their demise. Or another way to look at it is that we have a concept in our tradition that on the way that you go, God will help you. If you want to do a good thing, God will help you. If you want to spread, Torah wisdom, God will help you. God will help you in the way you want to go. If you want to destroy people, God will help you do that too. Sometimes, maybe not. So Nadav and Avihu wanted that religious connection. They wanted to have a divine experience, a transcendent experience. They wanted it so badly, God helped them. And the ultimate divine experience was for their souls to leave their bodies and to ascend up into the higher realms. So death on some level, we'll talk about Nadav and Avihu, but that's how we see death in this day and age also, is the release of the soul from the body. So when Nadav and Avihu are consumed by fire, because they had a desire to come close to God, they wanted a transcendent experience, they wanted to go beyond their physicality. God says, I'll help you, I'll bring you up here, I'll take you out of your bodies. And they died. On that day they died. Just as a sidebar comment, I've been hearing such sad stories of people dying of the COVID and dying alone. And everybody, it's so tragic, and I can't even do any justice to speak about it, but we all know that it's happening. And we also know that because of COVID and because of our fear of contracting COVID, that people are dying without anybody around their bedsides, without anybody there to say goodbye to them. And some of the things that I've been learning that might address this lack that we feel we have when we're not with somebody who's dying. In our tradition, we have a sense that God comes and he brings the soul. He brings the soul up into the higher realms. So yes, there might not be physical people in this world next to the person who's deceased, but God is coming down and coming down. God is there. God is around the sick person. We have an idea that the Shekhinah, the feminine divine presence, descends upon a sick person, which is another reason why it's important for us to visit sick people. That we enter into divine space. There's a divine space that is around a sick person. Because God's there along with the sick person. So when if the sick person were to pass away, then God's there to escort the person up into the higher realms. And the person, if you've ever heard people's near-death experiences, that they at the point where they die, they are very aware of God's presence. There's a light, there's a love, there's something to go towards that they're very attracted to, and many people speak about not wanting to come back into this world, that they're so attracted to move forward, to move towards the light, towards the love, towards whatever it is, and their relatives are coming to greet them. Their relatives, the people that they are connected to, the people that they have relationships with, that have predeceased them, they come to meet them. So we, on this physical side of the petition, say, yes, it seems like the person's alone, but if you take it into a bigger picture, they're not really alone because their loved ones are coming to meet them, and God himself, I don't really want to use a him and a her, maybe herself, because it's a Shekhinah, is there to escort the person, so that to go into the spiritual realm, the soul is happy to be released. It's the people left behind who are mourning, and we do mourn, and that's very appropriate. But the soul is moving on and moving into a different realm. So that's that. So that's Shemini. So Shemini, last week's Torah portion, had this whole inauguration on the 8th day, on this supernatural day. Aaron becomes the Kohen, he becomes the priest, he's going to bless the people, he's going to do divine service. He himself, Aaron, being involved in the sin of the golden calf, feels himself to be an inadequate human being. He feels himself to be an inadequate human being. And his humility comes from that. Like, I could have done more. I should have done more. I should have been different. No. I have shame for what I did. I'm not what I want to be. And in that space of not being what you want to be, there's humility. So Aaron represents a humility of not being, not seeing himself as good enough as a human being. Moses, on the other hand, sees himself as being minuscule in relationship to God. His humility, Moses' humility, comes from an understanding of the hugeness, omnipotence, of the grandeur of everything that I don't even have the words for, of God. Moses, the most connected to God that of any man ever, is the most humble, and they go hand in hand. Why? Because Moses has had a direct experience with God, and that direct experience gives Moses a perspective that I, Moses, am nothing compared to God. Absolutely nothing compared to God. So Moses' humility comes from his direct experience with God, whereas Aaron's humility comes from his own feeling of inadequacy and ineptitude. So there's two different kinds of humility, which Aaron and Moses represent. So Moses is the man of truth. He's the man who went up onto Mount Sinai, and he had an experience with God, and he transcended into a spiritual realm. He talked to God face to face, and his sense of his own physicality and being a human being and not being an angel and not being anything and just being a human being is nothing compared to the God that he had an experience with. And so he's the man of truth. Aaron is the man who is very rooted in his sense of being a human being and his limitations and inadequacies and weaknesses and strengths, etc. So he sees himself in relation to humanity, how he's small, and he represents the man of peace. He, we understand, is a man who represents the character trait of pursuing peace, always pursuing peace, so pursuing the connection between people, like always looking to try to smooth it over and to make it better between people and to resolve disputes and to make people more united and to bring peace between people, which is why he's somebody who can bless the people, because that's his whole goal, is to bring peace to the world. Like Moses is about bringing truth to the world, and Aaron's about bringing peace to the world. Okay, so that's the first half of last week's Parsha, Torah portion. The second half of the Torah portion is about the animals that we can eat, about what's kosher and what's not kosher. So just to quickly synopsize, so mammals that we can eat, animals that we can eat, have to have a cloven hoof, they have to have a split hoof, and they have to chew their cud. It has to ruminate and come up and go down and come up and go down. Those animals are kosher. The fish that are kosher have to have fins and scales. And then we talk about other animals in the Torah portion, about what animals you can eat, and what feeds you spiritually. So again, we don't have the spiritual antenna to know what without being told what animals to eat and what animals not to eat. Like they all, whatever, as long as you can eat, whatever. But the Torah is telling us, God is telling us, if you want to hone your sense of spirituality and your sense of holiness and your sense of bringing out the soul aspects of yourself, you have to eat spiritual food. And spiritual food is kosher food. And this is kosher food. This is what kosher animals are. And then we learn from the oral Torah how to kill those animals and how to remove the blood of the animal, because the blood represents the life force of the animal. So we remove the blood from the animal before we eat it. Fish have to have fins and scales. Interestingly, if you think about a fish with fins and scales, then they have scales because they can protect themselves from the elements. As the Jewish people, we need to protect ourselves. Sometimes we have a rise in anti-Semitism going on now, and there's anti-Semitism always. We have to have a scaly exterior sometimes to be able to function. And we also need fins because we need to be able to maneuver through the world. We have to do that. So maybe that's how it goes. And I also heard, I won't go there. Anyway, so those are things that we can eat, and it tells that in this week's Torah portion. So it's again how to make ourselves the most holy, and we go on and on and on and on and on in the Torah, being told you should be holy, I'm holy, God's holy, you should be holy, you should be holy, you should be holy. What does it mean to be holy? It means to connect yourself to God. It means to separate yourself. It means to be able to kind of put boundaries and say, these are the things that God says I have to do in order to be a holy person, in order to connect myself to divine, in order to connect myself to transcendent. This is what I have to do. These are the quote unquote the spiritual rules of the universe. And if you want to be a spiritual holy person, you have to follow these rules. If you want to enter into the Mishkan, into the temple when it existed in Jerusalem, and please God, when the third temple comes, we'll have a third temple and we'll be able to enter that. How do I do that? What do I need to do to elevate myself above the physical? I want the spiritual to be more of who I am than the physical, right? I need my physicality to do and to go and to think and to act and to speak, and I need my body to carry my soul in this world. But my soul, what's in the driving seat? Is my body in the driving seat, or is my soul in the driving seat? And the Torah and God is saying, I need you, the human being who stands upright, right, and has a soul that I'm breathing into you. That's who you are. You're a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. You're a soul with a body. And the soul is only able to exist in this world because you have a body. But the soul should be in the driving seat. The soul should be what drives you and animates your body, so that your body can do good things and say good things and be good things. So now we're going to move into this week's Torah portion coming up. 2 Torah portions, Tazria and Metzora. And it talks about a skin affliction, an affliction that a person gets when they are spiritually going the wrong direction, right? So it's when if a person were to speak ill of another person, we call it Lashon Hara. If you speak badly of other people, if you slander, if you gossip, there are other reasons why we would get a physical expression of our spiritual negativity. So if we speak ill of other people, we would then manifest that. We manifest that on our bodies. There would be it's called sara'as. It's a skin condition. It's translated into the English as some kind of leprosy or something, but really it's not. It doesn't have a medical term. It's a spiritual. If a person is too arrogant, if a person speaks ill of another person, if a person's really off track, stealing or these other things, then a person is afflicted with this condition called sara'as, and that person then has this skin condition, and it's called a nega. There's the skin condition that they have, and they would go to the Kohen. They would go to our friendly Aaron and his descendants, and they would say, diagnose me. What is wrong? What is this? And Aaron is the one. Aaron, our epitome of 2 things. One is he's the peacemaker. He wants there to be unity between people, and he's also the one who has sinned. He's the one who did this sin of the golden calf. He sees that in front of him always. He's always aware that he did a sin. And actually, I want to read you something I thought was really awesome. If I can find it. Yeah. Oh no, maybe I can't find it. Oh, yes, I can find it. So why it is that Aaron chose to be the one, Aaron and his descendants, that the person who's concerned with this skin affliction goes to be diagnosed. Why Aaron? Because Aaron was complicit, was involved with the sin of the golden calf. So I was just read, and I don't actually know the source of it. I took this a while ago. Remember how I said, when Moses says to Aaron, for this you were chosen. You were chosen to be the high priest. You were chosen to be the one to whom people who've spoken Lashon Hara, people who've spoken ill of other people, they have to come to have their skin affliction diagnosed. Right? The task of a high priest is to atone for people's sins. It was his role on Yom Kippur to confess the wrongs and failings and to ask for forgiveness. Because you, Aaron, know what sin is like. You know what it is to feel guilty. You, more than anyone else, understand the need for repentance and atonement. You have felt the cry of your soul to be cleansed, purified, and wiped free of the stain of transgression. What you think of as your greatest weakness will become, in this role you are about to assume, your greatest strength. Isn't that amazing? Like the things that we do sometimes, we say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Like, that's such a weakness. And yet we can turn it around and it can become our greatest strength. Better by far to know you are imperfect than to believe you are perfect, right? When none of us are perfect, let's embrace that. Let's know that. Let's understand that. And let's try to work to improve ourselves. And in the things that we know that we've done wrong and we feel ashamed of, let's try not to do that again. But let's also be more compassionate to other people. God loves us and believes in us despite and sometimes because of our imperfections. Our weaknesses make us human. Wrestling with them makes us strong. Our weaknesses make us human. Wrestling with them makes us strong. So here's Aaron wrestling with the greatest of sins, of this golden calf, of idolatry, and he's wrestling with that. And in that wrestling, he becomes the Babel to have compassion for people who come to him and they say, "Is this a nega? Is this the Saras? Is it?" And he gets to be the one to diagnose. And the person who has this nega then has a whole series of things that they can do to fix the problem, right? It's a physical manifestation that's saying, change course, right? You did this wasn't right. You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have caused discourse between people. Again, when we speak ill of people, we're bringing discourse. We're bringing disunity. And it's taking us away from the goal. The goal is unity. When God's presence came down on that tabernacle on that 8th day, that inauguration day, and the people rejoiced, we were all there together, all united as one. When we receive the Torah, when Moses comes down and we've all received the Torah, that we're one. There's a oneness that we're pursuant of. That's what we want. We want this oneness. And that's exactly, if we go off track and we get this nega, we get this affliction, we get this saras, you could say, oh, that's crazy. It's a plague, right? I am not drawing any similarities at all to today, but it is interesting that this plague was a wake-up call for the person to say, okay, I'm going to examine my ways. I'm going to understand. I'm going to see that I did something wrong, and I'm going to not do that again. I realize that what I did, what I said, caused disunity, caused discord, separated me from the crowd. And what happens is, when he then is diagnosed as having this skin condition, it puts him into a different category, right? So we, again, in bad English, when we translate the words, we go from a state of tahor, which loosely translates as purity, into a state of tameh, which is impurity, but it's not. It's a different spiritual reality, right? So the tahorness of us, when we're all doing the right thing and we're good, and that tahor that nobody is today, that purity was what was necessary for them to be able to go into the tabernacle or go into the temple in Jerusalem. That's what we want to be. We want to be able to pull ourselves up to that level where we can enter into the holy temple. So if we spoke ill of people, it takes us into a different domain. We become tameh. We become into a different spiritual reality, and we have to fix that. So we become tameh. So the person who becomes tameh has to say, I'm tameh. Tameh says it twice. And it's so interesting that, again, it's the words that we speak. We create a reality by the words we speak. The person who's used words to denigrate someone or speak ill of somebody, then has to use words on some level to say, oh, I recognize how powerful my words are because I used a word tameh, and now I'm ashamed of myself, and people hear me and they know that I didn't do the right thing. And what's so interesting is that when people around hear that this person is now tameh, they are enjoined to pray for that person. We have to pray that the person gets healed. We want unity. We want us all to be good. So if somebody's saying, I'm tameh, our response isn't, well, you brought it upon yourself, it's your problem. It's not to do that. Not to do that. Our response is, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for you. You should be healed. And where we learn that from is coming up in the future. We're not up to that point yet. But again, I'm going to skip ahead. Miriam, who is the sister of Moses, she speaks about Moses and his relationship with his wife. So she speaks in a way that wasn't appropriate, and we'll talk about it later on. And she becomes afflicted with tzraas. And what happens to her is that she is, as is anybody, and this is what we read about in this week's coming up Torah portion, is the person who is afflicted with tzraas, who has a nega, who has these afflictions, has to leave the camp, right? You did something that caused disunity in the camp. You upset the social balance. You did something that was destructive to the social fabric that we're trying to create. Therefore, sort of measure for measure, your consequence is that you have to now exist outside of the camp. You have to be quarantined outside of the camp for a week and think about what you did, and and not do it again. And then you can come back. And again, if you have fixed the problem, then the Kohen, the priest, will declare you, and then there's various steps you have to go through to then be able to re-enter the camp fully. Part of what you have to do to re-enter the camp fully is you have to immerse in the mikveh. You have to you have to immerse in holy, living water, in water that is fresh. A swimming pool is not living water. A pond, a lake is, a sea is, an ocean is. A mikveh is created from rainwater that comes from the sky, that's flowing, that's connected to the source. There's water, the water that represents life. Water that represents life is what you need to go through to come out and be reborn, and to come out and be considered tahor, be considered able to re-enter the camp and ultimately go into the Mishkan or go into the Tabernacle and reconnect yourself back to God, because you've done the necessary steps to bring you there. So what's so interesting is part of the ritual that you have to do as a person who's been quarantined outside the camp and now is ready to come back in. Another thing you have to do is you have to bring 2 birds. You have to bring 2 doves. And what's so interesting about a dove, turtle dove, is that they are absolutely loyal. Apparently they only mate with the same partner. They don't have lots of partners. They enter into a relationship with another dove, and they have that relationship their whole life. They're loyal. So we bring these doves. So there's 2 doves that you bring. So one dove is slaughtered, and the blood, the life force of that dove then gets mixed with mayim chayim, with living water. It gets mixed together, and that's then sprinkled on to the forehead and the hand of the person who's now re-entering, who did have the tzara'as, did have this physical manifestation of a spiritual ailment. Coming back into the camp has to be sprinkled with the water that's mixed with the blood from this dove that was sacrificed or slaughtered, along with a cedar, a hyssop, which is a lowly plant, a cedar, which is a tall tree, it's cedar wood, hyssop, and a crimson thread. That those are dipped into the water and the blood mixture and sprinkled onto the forehead and the hand of the Metzora, of the person who's now cured, so to speak, of his spiritual ailment and is now coming back into the camp. So we're taking mayim chayim, we're taking living water, we're taking something that represents life, and we're saying, okay, you've now done your spiritual work. That nega that you had is being cured. You've cured yourself. You did the necessary work outside the camp. Now you can come back in, and we're going to sprinkle you with living waters. You're going to shave your hair. You're going to go into the mikveh. You're going to reborn, ready to enter the camp, right? So we still have mikveh today. So that's something that again, there's a lot of layers to this. I'm just giving a brief overview. I only have an hour, and it's just like there's so much to give over. But this is an interesting thing that happened. So I want to speak about this word nega. So the word nega is this spiritual blemish this physical blemish that you have on your body. It could be on your house, it could be on your clothing, or it could be on your body. Right? So nega is made up of 3 Hebrew letters. If you flip those 3 Hebrew letters around, you get the word oneg. So oneg means pleasure, of joy of Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat is joy of Shabbat, is a pleasurable experience. Whereas the other way around is a nega. It's a demise. It's a negative thing. And it says in the mystical sources that as high as oneg is as low as nega is. That oneg and nega are on the polar opposites of each other. Oneg meaning joy and connection to spirituality and holiness, and the opposite is the nega, is this affliction. And the letter ayin, which represents your eye, right? In a nega, it's at the end of the sentence, right? It's not the predominant thing that is driving you, right? When you speak ill of someone, the eye that you use, maybe you're not using a good eye, you're using an evil eye. It's the end of the word. Whereas an oneg has an ayin at the beginning, representing, says the spiritual sources, representing the good eye, the eye that looks for the cup half full, the eye that looks at each other for the good. And again, it's such an interesting thing, like these words, like the words create, our speech creates good or bad, right? So if we speak lashon hara, if we speak bad language, if we speak gossip and slander and things that put other people down and create dissent, then we're bringing the world down. Whereas we speak positive words that bring up the world, we're building the world. Like God created the world with speech. He built the world with speech. We also can build our world with speech. And the 2 doves represent the words that we use, because birds chitter chatter chatter. Apparently that's why the bird was one of the reasons why it's given, why we use birds for this procedure to bring us back into the camp. The bird that was slaughtered was the bird that spoke ill of people, and the bird that is not slaughtered, is eventually then let go, is the bird that represents the chittering chattering of the good language that we didn't say. So there's sort of 2 aspects to what we today, and back then too, how we can use our words, right? We can use our words to elevate the world, or we can use our words to bring it down. And so the lashon hara, the evil language, that was the bird that was slaughtered, and the bird that was let go represented the language, the positive language that we didn't say. And I can't remember, I think I read it from Rabbi Sachs, that he suggested that one of the things that maybe we can do while we're in quarantine, who are we in quarantine with? That those people are really the people against whom and with whom we're interacting in very close quarters, and we have to learn how to get on with those people, and we have to work on ourselves, and it's really bringing a lot out. But maybe an exercise could be, says Rabbi Sachs, every day say something to the people you're living with. Each person, say something good to them about them, like build them up, say good things to them about them, right? It's easy for us to say, oh, this person, and get down and be negative, but maybe we could use this opportunity to find the good and look for the good, and use the oneg, the ayin at the beginning, and bring joy into our home by looking for the good in each other and saying the good things about each other and saying it to the person and build them up. Like how much we can create and build by building each other up. And again, knowing that this period between Passover and the next holiday of Shavuot, when we receive the Torah, represents building blocks that we can bring. 49 days when we went from coming out of Egypt, when we were in the lowest spiritual level, to getting to the highest spiritual level when we were ready to receive the Torah, receive the 10 Commandments from Moses on Mount Sinai. 49 days in between those two events is what we're in now. We're building ourselves day by day with different spiritual energies being in existence. And today represents the energy of Hod. Hod and Gevura. So again, these are terms, but Hod means humility and sort of splendor, like we're, on the one hand we're great, on the other hand we're nothing, and then we have Gevura, which is like a discipline. So every day we have different ways to kind of work on different aspects of ourselves. But I really think that one of the things that we could do that's very practical and was born out from this week's Torah portion is to use our language while we're in quarantine with the people that we are with, or the people that we Zoom with, or the people who we talk on the phone, etc., etc. That these are days where we could use our language to build each other, and to build each other, and to keep building each other, because that's going to create oneg, because we have the ayin at the beginning of the word. So let's do that. Another way of looking at these words is that tzra'as, that this skin affliction that we're afflicted with if we speak ill of each other, that the tzra'as, it also has the letters that when they're rearranged into the word atzeres, like Shemini atzeres, like it's the assembly, that we're assembling a group, we're coming together as one, and the tzra'as is a disassembling. So again, like there's two sides. We live with this paradox. On the one hand, we can create disunity very easily, and at the same time we can create unity. So where's our eye? What are we looking to do? What are we looking to create? How are we looking to move forward into the next day, tomorrow, the day after, instead of looking like way into the front? That's just today and tomorrow. Like, how am I going to build? How am I going to build? And how am I going to count these days till I get to the 49th day? Like, where am I going to be in 49 days? Where am I going to be in one day? Where am I going to be tomorrow? How am I going to use my language? So Lashon Hara was the negative language that was used, that created this spiritual affliction, physical affliction, that the Kohen, who is our Aaron, who is our priest, who is the man of peace, who is the man looking to bring people together all the time, is a man who acknowledges his own inadequacies and own weaknesses. He understands the people coming to him, and they have these afflictions, and he has to diagnose them, and then they have to be quarantined, and then when they've been through their week of quarantine, they can come back and they can be reevaluated. Have they done the spiritual work to bring themselves up, and then go through the process to be allowed back into the camp, to be able to function back with everybody else, because we're social creatures. We all know that. We all know that as much as we might have managed day 1, day 2, day 3 of quarantine, those of us who are very outgoing and like to be around people, this is challenging. It's challenging to be in your home and only see people and not be able to hug people and not be able to shake hands with people or interact with people on an ongoing basis. It's hard. It's hard to be quarantined. We're social creatures. And what's the Metzora? What's the person who spreads Lashon Hara, or the person who brings apart the fabric of society? What happens to him? It's measure for measure. When he takes apart the society, he has to leave. You have to leave the camp. You have to sit outside the camp before you can come back in. Okay, so that was some of the things I want to say. So what else did I want to say? Let me just go over and see if there's something that comes out of this. So last week's Torah portion was Shemini, and Shemini was the 8th day, and on the eighth day, the temple was inaugurated. It was an amazing day. Everything had been done perfectly. Divine presence comes down with this fire. The people saw it. They prostrated. Aaron, who was not sure, is this the role for me? Moses says to him, "For this you were created. For this this is why everything's led to this, right? You've used your experiences to become a better person, to work on yourself, to understand people. You're a man of peace. You're a man who understands that." Moses is more of a man of truth. He's a man who had more of an interaction with God. His humility comes from his sense of himself in relationship to God. So the more connected to God you are, the more humble you feel, because you realize you're nothing. Like, I'm dust, but I'm dust of the earth. I'm nothing. God created me. God gave me all my talents. Everything I am is because God given that to me. And Aaron also feeling his human inadequacies. So these two brothers play off each other perfectly. They don't have any animosity towards each other. They love each other. And actually, so then we have Aaron's sons who come in with a fire, a foreign fire that wasn't asked, and they come into the Holy of Holies with this fire, desiring a transcendent experience, desiring connection with God. God says, okay, fine, I'll give you this connection, and their souls leave their bodies, they go up into the higher realms. And Aaron is silent. Aaron is silent. But this death of Nadav and Avihu happened in the Holy of Holies. What's going to be with their bodies? What's going to be with their clothing? Like they were souls were like burnt out of them, were pulled out of them, and their shell is left behind. And it's not Aaron's other brothers who pull the dead brothers out of the Holy of Holies. It's cousins. The cousins are chosen to come and take out the bodies, which is very interesting. Like, why the cousins? Why not the nearest of kin? Why not the brothers? Why not Aaron himself? Because Aaron and his brothers are continuing to do the service in the temple, and because these cousins have a different role to play. They're not Kohanim, they're not priests, so they have no jealousy, they have no animosity, they are grief-stricken that their cousins were consumed in this way, and there's no tint that they would gloat or be happy about what happened. They are able to extract the bodies out of the Holy of Holies and do it with the purest of intentions to bring the bodies out and bury those bodies. Which is again what we do for our dead. We take our dead and we immediately bury them. Like the physical aspects of who we are has to be buried in the ground. And with COVID, I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not, that people are not being buried. I hope that everybody's getting buried, because that's important for our tradition, that bodies get buried. Okay, so he's silent, and then we have the whole laws of which animals you can eat, which animals you can't eat. The fishes have fins and scales, and the animals that we eat have a split hoof and chew their cud. So here's a nice thought about why it is that these two animals, I heard, mystical understanding, that the cloven hoof represents our physicality. We do something. We use our feet to run and do, and we have two. So we have to, like, the cloven hoof is like, yes, you do, but then you do more. Like, you keep doing, like it builds on itself. Like, don't be ever complacent. Keep moving, keep doing. Like, you do one, but do two. And then that's on the external. And then internally, we have this rumination. The animals, they chew their cud, they swallow something and they eat it, and then it comes back up and they chew it some more and they swallow it again, and there's rumination that goes on, and that rumination is something that also we spiritually have to do. We go through our lives and we do things and we have to think about it. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? It comes up, then I have to chew over it and swallow it again, and then did I do the right thing? That's us. We're always second guessing and thinking about it and wanting to do it right, and did I chew it enough, and did I understand it enough, and can I connect to it enough, and did I extract out of that food all the juices, all the goodness? Did I do everything right? We're very, very busy doing that as well. So perhaps the animal, you are what you eat, right? So if we eat animals that chew their cud, if we eat animals that have a split hoof, those are our attributes too. If we eat fish that have fins and scales, those are our attributes. And so it's interesting to think that what we take in becomes us. We are what we eat. We take in an animal. We eat an animal. I don't, but some people do. I eat fish. You take it in, it becomes you. That's what animates you, and then you become. So it's God says to be holy, to work on his spirituality, to be able to have a connection to divine energies, spirituality, transcendence. Then these are the foods that you can eat, and these are the foods you can't eat, and it's all delineated here. So that's what goes into your mouth. And then in the next two parshas, which we're coming up to, we read about what comes out of our mouths, right? What goes into our mouths, what we eat, but what comes out of our mouths. What do we speak? How do we speak? What's the language we're using? Are we using language with an ayin, with a good ayin, with a good eye? Are we using language with a bad eye? Are we caught up with jealousies and arrogance? And can we get rid of our ego somewhere in there? Get rid of that, or recognize, yes, I have talents. I have things that God gave me and things that I have to do. For this I was created. What is it that I'm created for? What are my talents? Where do they come from? Why do I have them? Why am I in this family? What is this family teaching me? What are these people that I'm living with teaching me? What can I say to them? How can I use my language to build up? And in the days that we're reading about in the Torah, if you went out of line, you got the gift of having tsuras. On some level, you could see it as a gift because it's a wake-up call. It's saying you're off track. Come back. We want you in the camp. We want you to be part of the social fabric. We want you to help us build our society. But if you talk this way and you act this way, then you have to go over there. You have to go outside the camp. You have to quarantine yourself. You have to like take stock, and then you can come back. And if you've done the correct work, if you actually worked on yourself well enough that nega has gone away, that you're ready to be part of the assembly again, then you go through the mikveh and you bring these two birds, the bird that represented the bad language and the bird that represented the good language that you didn't speak. And so I'm going to end on that note. The language that we didn't speak, that's work. Maybe that's a good thing to think about for this coming week. What is it, the language that we could be speaking that we're not, or for some reason we're holding us back? And maybe like get off this call and say something good and positive and build somebody up in your environment. So that's a little bit of the Torah for this coming week, last week and this coming week. And please God, we'll be here next week. And we can listen in to next Tuesday night at 8:00. And I wish you all a healthy week and a good week, and a week where we bless each other, and a week where we build each other, and a week where we can have unity, a spiritual unity that is not predicated, obviously, on a physical unity.